Welcome to the podcast where three longtime friends talk about video games from the average gamer's perspective. My name is Andrew Kimball.
I'm Dylan Wren.
And I'm Aubrey Summer.
And
we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
What's up and welcome back to the neighborhood. On this episode, we are talking to the host of the Good Playing With You podcast. Good Playing With You is the ultimate destination for gamers who live, breathe, and dream video games. Whether you're a casual player or a hardcore enthusiast, the podcast dives deep into the latest gaming releases, industry news, and epic gaming moments that you can't afford to miss. Please welcome to the show, Dan Whitehill. Dan, how's it going?
Great. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Dylan is also here on this episode. Aubrey, unfortunately, could not be with us tonight, but I still think we're going to have an absolute blast. Our first interview of 2025, so you get the award for that, I guess.
Yes,
we have
exactly. Exactly. Well, cool.
So
I'm looking forward to it.
The way that this episode is going to break down, if you're new to the show, is we are going to be talking to Dan, asking him about his show, podcasting, content creation, YouTube, all that fun stuff. And then in the back half of the conversation, we're going to shift over and talk about gaming. We're going to get to know Dan as a gamer. And then to wrap things up, we have a trivia game that Dylan has come up for us that we'll play at the end to put a nice little bow on this episode. So I'm excited to get into it. Obviously read a little bit of a blurb kind of going over your show, but I want to hear it from you kind of in your own words. What is it that you do? What is Good Gaming With You?
Good playing with
my
you.
podcast.
Good playing with you.
No worries. My podcast is generally, it's me and my two buddies. We all live in LA. We have video game experience. Some of us, like my buddy Matt Lord, he is worked at GameStop. Matt Moulding, he worked in marketing, and I myself have a history of G4 TV. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the cable channel back in the day.
Yes.
Okay, well, so I worked there for years and years until, unfortunately, RIP, they shut it down. So that's really like what made me a super video game addict. But our podcast is a little bit different from yours because we do focus primarily just on the biggest headlines of the week. We give like hot takes and then we kind of move on. Where you guys are, I've been listening to your podcast and of course I love it. You're so much more thoughtful. You have such a fun, casual conversation and you go a lot deeper into stuff. We just kind of like hit the headlines and move on. So, so I think there's room for both. And I think they're both great.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm curious to hear a little bit more about G4. What did you do with them?
So I started working there way back as a peanut. And what's so funny is like I loved video games. And then one of my friends who, Chad, he lived in West Hollywood or whatever. And I was going to go over and we play video games all the time. He's like, "Hey, Dan, you've got to come over. There's this new channel on my cable station. It's called G4. I'm like, "What?" So I come over and he's like, "This is just dedicated to video games." And I'm like, "Chad, I'm going to work there one day." And I set out upon papering G4 with my resume. I didn't care what job I got there. I just knew my destiny was to work for this amazing video game company because a video game TV company, because I studied like film and television in college, but I also loved video games. So this was like, this was Jesus telling me this is where I was meant to be. Eventually I did get hired as an assistant in ad and affiliate sales, which I can tell you, to be honest with you, if you're going to join a company, ad and affiliate sales is not the most exciting. No offense to anybody who's in that industry. But I was just so happy to get my foot in the door as assistant, and then was able to kind of work my way onto the website. And then I started writing content as a journalist. I covered, like the launch of the Wii U. My buddy Chad again and I slept outside on the concrete in West Hollywood outside the Best Buy for 24 hours, waiting in line to get the Wii. That was back in the days when you actually physically waited in lines and you didn't have to, didn't get lucky virtually or whatever. And so I wrote a lot for them. I launched all of their podcasts. I launched their YouTube channels. And basically that's what got my, love going for digital media, because that was kind of like when all of that was starting, as well as it didn't hurt that I had access to the G4 video game library. So every weekend, literally I had my own Blockbuster, except I didn't have to pay anything. And I would go down there and there was just a wall of video games. And they'd let us check them out for the weekend. We'd bring them back.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a huge perk of the job for sure. But it was a great time.
Yeah. Well, cool. Cool. So that's kind of like your history a little bit of like, here's maybe the start of this journey. So tell us a little bit about what got you started with uh Good Playing With You. How did that kind of spin out?
Great question. I was with so G4 is owned by Comcast, that then bought NBC Universal. So basically, I ping ponged around the cable universe for quite some time. Whether it was I worked for the Esquire network, which G4 turned into. I worked for Style. I worked for E Entertainment. You name it. If Comcast had its hand in it, I was there. And then eventually, after 20 years, I recently left NBC Universal. It was a great run, learned a lot, just wanted to expand my horizons, find some potential advancement opportunities, currently freelancing and that sort of stuff. But that's what led me to kind of start working with other people, meeting other people. And then in the meantime, between like freelancing and stuff, I've always wanted to have my own podcast and kind of explore that world, because I had been producing them for such a long time. And I'm super passionate about video games. And I'll be honest with you, I took one of those online courses for Code Academy or something like that, and actually tried to make my own video game. And I'm going to be honest with you, I have a newfound respect for anyone that actually makes video games, because dear Lord, I am not cut out for it. I like to think I have an eye for detail and stuff like that, and attention to detail and all of that coding. But doggy, it was, I can't imagine like you code as much as you do, and then you hit like compile and then it just doesn't work. And you have to that's half of the job, is sleuthing out what you're doing. So I was like, okay, obviously creating video games isn't for me. I'll just go, I'll be a critic, when you can't do, you teach situation. So
Yeah.
I really combined like two of my favorite things, like podcasting and video games. And I honestly, I play so much video games, and I talk about it with my buddies so much. It just made more sense to just be like, hey, we should record this, So that's how I ended up where I am today.
Yeah. Well, and so were your two co-hosts, were they like longtime friends? Were they people you had met through the industry? How did you kind of connect with them?
Yeah. So they're both named Matt, which is kind of a running joke on our show. They go by their last names, Lord and Molding. And so like Molding, I met when I very first moved out to Hollywood, and we've known each other for probably over 20 years. It's crazy.
Okay. Yeah.
And then Lord, funny enough, I hired him at NBC Universal, and he was, well, at first he started out as, a coordinator. Then I promoted him to supervisor, and then I promoted him to manager, all the way, kind of like over a course of a decade. So we worked really closely together. And then he left before I did. He went over to Vizio and stuff. And then when I left, we just kind of always kept in touch, because we play video games online, and we've always had such a good friendship. And it just made sense. Like my two best buddies are Matt, and just put them together, and then you got a show.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome. You have two Matts. Somehow you didn't manage to integrate that into the name somehow. So I'm curious how you guys came up with your name. Were you always like locked in on your name, or were there some that hit the cutting room floor? Like, take us through that process.
That's a really good question. To be honest with you, we did, think of so many. We were just going back and forth. We wanted something that was Well, I don't know about you guys, but I play with my friends online quite a bit. And so
Mhm.
whenever we're done playing, we always say, "Hey, good playing with you, good playing with you." And we just kind of say that saying all the time. So then I don't know, for some reason, one of them was just like, "Hey, maybe we should just, hey, that should be the time of our podcast," right as we're signing off. And we all kind of stopped for a second. We're like, I mean, it makes sense. And we say it every time. Maybe everybody else says it all the time. And then we'll be in their vocabulary. It'll be familiar to
Yeah.
someone who plays games online, and maybe that would translate. And so that's how we got our name.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well, cool.
no, that makes sense.
Mhm.
It's interesting. We did sort of a similar thing with our first podcast. We called it Level Playing Field, and now anytime we hear somebody say that, it's always like a haha, like they said the thing because we said it so much through the course of that show. So I totally
Right.
get that. It's kind of like just that catchphrase or
Mhm.
that quote that just like sticks with you and resonates.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. So you've been doing podcasting and like tangentially, either like connected to it or like doing your own podcast for a while now. It sounds like you've been like got into it maybe pretty early. What have been some of the biggest things that have surprised you about just like podcasting, the YouTube side of things, or any of that?
Good question. I think being from the cable world and television, one of the things
Mhm.
that we always did there was just grabbing, the audio from your TV show and putting it up as a podcast. And surprisingly enough, I don't want to bag on that, but like people will listen to that and those get great numbers. And so from our news
Mhm.
broadcasts and all that sort of stuff, even though there's like a whole video component that's missing and it's just audio only, those
Mhm.
get huge numbers. And then I would see stuff that's more like you guys are creating and we're creating, where it's like more bespoke. It is, native to the platform and it is a better
Mhm.
user and listener experience. And so
Mhm.
I think that was one of the shocks to me, was just the wide variety of content and the intent behind it. When I initially started, to be honest with you, dynamic ad insertion and any of that wasn't there. I mean, it really was the Wild West and people were just putting up
Mhm.
anything they could. We had a rap freestyle show called Freestyle at G4. We actually got featured, our podcast got featured in a Steve Jobs Apple presentation, and we
Mhm.
lost our, they didn't even tell us, they just used it, which is fine. I'm like, please take it,
Right.
and
Yeah.
seeing your content in like an Apple presentation is just, it was so wild. It was just such a different time. And now you have things like Wondery, and they're doing great work. I mean, they're fantastic stuff where it's
Mhm.
like subscription based, and it's just a different landscape with different players than it was before. So it's interesting. And it's also really up to, now it's so much up to the podcasters like ourselves to hustle, to get
Mhm.
it out there, to use social media. No one wants to help a brother, and that's why I loved working with you guys, and vice versa. I hope you enjoyed working on with us on our shows, because so far this is the only thing I've seen that like really, like, you have to help each other out, because you've got these
Mhm.
big corporations that are putting out subpar content, and then you've got us that just don't have the megaphones that they have. And I think that that's
Mhm.
really been the most eye-opening, because I came from the other side. I had the megaphone. I had the millions of followers on different platforms that I could push to these things.
Mhm.
And not having that's been humbling and a learning experience for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because yeah, it's always interesting to kind of hear. A lot of times when we're talking about this, we're talking about it with people that are like kind of in the same boat as us, where it's like somebody who's only ever been in the indie podcaster side of things, where you start with like your parents and friends listening to it and try to grow from there. And so it's interesting to hear from like somebody who's had some of that experience more on that other side of it, where it's like, oh no, like I got a chance to put out some of those big podcasts that you see at the top of the list that you're always like, that we are always aspiring to get to. So
Yeah.
it's cool, very cool.
Yeah. And it's
How did
unfortunate. Sorry, go ahead. No, I
well
was going to say it's unfortunate that the game seems a little bit rigged, because like promotion
mhm,
on iTunes or anything, and I hope they don't hear this, but like they gravitate towards known brands and that
yeah,
sort of stuff.
yeah,
And so even if the product isn't as good as the stuff you guys are putting out, they're
mhm,
going to trust that sort of news media organization. And
mhm,
so it's just a different ball game. That's
yeah.
altogether.
Yeah. How would you say that your experience on like that, the more professional side of things has changed maybe how you are looking at and approaching your current project?
Oh wow, such a good question. Wow, I appreciate that. I think um, because of my experience in the digital side of things, and YouTube mainly, I our podcast. I hate to sound like such a nerd, but like you have to, or truly anal, because I am truly anal. But using YouTube, the only place I've been able to find any sort of like traffic or get any sort of attention so far has been YouTube. In fact,
Hmm.
Andrew, I don't know if you saw that the short we made regarding Helldivers last week with you in it is over 15,000 views already.
Awesome.
I
So,
did see that. I
yeah.
saw a lot of back and forth in the comments about about the
Yeah.
shovels.
Yeah, it's definitely a spicy take. But it was fun. And I think in terms of like trying to find an audience, the only place
Hmm.
so far, I mean, I'm pushing in different areas and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys are too. And we definitely should share tips after the show. But YouTube has been the one that's been, everyone's like, oh, it's the second largest search platform and yada, yada. But it
Hmm.
actually is one of the best I found so far for finding an audience.
Hmm.
Albeit podcasts are not natively the best content because YouTube wants YouTube
Hmm.
content. They want, those Mr. Beast shows is really what they want. They don't want our type of content because sometimes it's
Hmm.
not as visually appealing or not as edited. Now, you guys do a great job of putting in gameplay, and that's definitely the next step, I think, for where we are, is putting
Hmm.
more gameplay, and that's putting more of the visual element into our podcast. But the way that our show is kind of designed is almost like a news show because I worked on
Hmm.
e-news for such a long time. I
Yeah.
worked on Attack of the Show. I worked on X Play. I worked on so
Hmm.
many TV shows. And so I think I follow more of a TV show sort of mindset where it's like you have to move and you don't get very
Hmm.
deep because if someone's not interested in one segment, then man, you got to get to the next segment to keep them. And YouTube does an amazing job of providing metrics that you can look at. So when we upload our um, full episodes to YouTube. Now, of course, we use shorts and stuff to promote them
Hmm.
and get more
Yeah.
eyeballs and stuff, but they have such a refined metric system in the back end that we literally go in a week or two later and every episode and we can see the drop off of like, oh, we talked about this game. This game isn't tracking very well with our audience. They're not very interested in it. Let's not talk about this game as much going forward. Oh, there's a huge spike there. It's no surprise that we
Hmm.
talked about Helldivers on our last podcast because we have gotten some of our biggest videos with the Helldivers community that has such
Hmm.
a niche that has endured for since launch, and we love the game ourselves, but it's also good to bring it up when you know that's going to actually give you views and you have something important or you have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
So you don't want to leave out the fact that you have to be entertainment, but using YouTube second by second analytics to see audience drop off and retention has been really what's driven the format of the show and drives our creative.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, cool.
Yeah.
I like what you said about YouTube actually being a place where you can kind of grow community. I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like, if you want to engage, it's right there. Like
Yeah.
Hmm.
podcasts, I've heard it lots of different ways to basically say like it's a very isolated form of like content creation, or very like
For sure.
you don't get a lot of feedback. Like you can see downloads and you can see that, well, people are obviously listening. We have listeners all around the world, but we've got, a handful of reviews on Apple Podcasts. Like it's just, that's not the medium. Whereas
Hmm.
YouTube, it's like it's right there. You can comment, you can say something, you can be part of that
Yeah.
conversation. And so I think that is one of the reasons why it can, if it's working
Hmm.
like you want it to, foster that community like kind of right there. Whereas like just
Yeah.
traditional podcasting, it's like unless you create some sort of separate thing like we've done, with like a Discord server somewhere for people to gather that are interested, there's nothing
Yeah.
in
Hmm.
podcasting itself that like allows for that sense of community.
Yeah. Well, and just
100%.
the YouTube side of things where it's like, I mean, I don't know how many people are like going in and liking and commenting and stuff, but like the fact that they can like and comment a podcast where most other platforms that's not natively built into it, and just having sort of the ecosystem where it's like you can put short content out, you can put more like medium form content out, and you can put long form content out, and it's all going into the same pool. So if somebody likes your shorts and they follow you, then they're also getting served your podcast content, where it's like if you get big on like TikTok, they like your TikToks. They may not take the next leap and see, like, they're never going to get served like, oh, here's your hour long podcast. So I do agree with you too, that I think YouTube right now at least seems like the best way to try to like grow as a podcast for sure.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience. And I think, Andrew, you also hit the nail on the head in terms of just fostering that community, because it's been fun to kind of change our show. We just hit like our 60th episode with Andrew on it. So we've bypassed our first year, but we're still constantly tweaking the show and changing the format and changing sections and seeing what works and seeing what other people are doing and that sort of stuff. But you're right. I do love the community. When you put an episode up, you've got your hardcore friends that are out there cheering you on. They're listening to your podcast. They're responding to it, and you memorize their names. I mean, even if it's a stranger, their usernames on YouTube right away, and the history if they've because we're smaller, so we know our audience really, really well. And then like you'll have a short, like our most recent one that goes relatively viral or whatever, and then you have people coming in there and be like, "Oh, fuck you don't know what you're talking about."
Yep.
And so you kind of the knife cuts both ways, and you have to have a thick skin. Yes, you've got really good people that listen to you and have well-meaning and good intentions, and they have great comments, and then you've got those bastards that are just coming in there to tear you down and tell you to F off because you've hurt their feelings in some way. And those are funny too, like it doesn't affect me at all. And but it is funny. It's just that you get both extremes on that platform, and for good and bad.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. We've kind of touched on it probably a little bit, but I'm curious what you would say has been the most difficult or challenging part of your podcasting journey so far, with launching this show.
I definitely think, man, good question. Because to be honest with you, if you're just putting a podcast out there, especially the way that your podcast is formatted is smart, it's more evergreen. Mine is a little bit tricky because it's so topical and dealing with the news of the week that my episodes don't do as well, after a month or two, as I imagine yours probably still do. So that's tough. And then I think finding an audience, finding anything that works is kind of tough. And we're definitely using social media. We're using TikTok and Facebook and all that sort of stuff. We actually have our blog up at goodplayingwithyou.com, and we write articles at least every single week because we're trying to gain more SEO, as well as potentially looking into syndicating our articles out, but I haven't got there yet. But so we're doing everything we can. And then like I said, it's a blessing and a curse with YouTube being an audience really development place, because our content, unfortunately, is not native to that platform. And so you go in there and you have to remember you're a podcast and this is what you're doing. And it's real easily to be tempted to it's a black hole of work. And I mean, you literally could cut up your podcast. You could put in tons of B-roll. There's a billion things you could do. And suddenly you're not making a podcast anymore. You're making a YouTube, videos and stuff like that. And it's like, you have to dial back your kind of, your ambition and your goals and your workflow, just to be like, hey, I only have the bandwidth to do this. Let's not go crazy. Let's stick with our original vision. Because man, YouTube and other platforms like TikTok and all that sort of stuff can just suck you in. And then by the end of the day, you are just run ragged and exhausted creating content that is a square peg in a round hole that doesn't natively fit on that platform. So you can't be upset if your video doesn't do 1 million views or anything like that. I'm not able to compete with Mr. Beast or anything like that. I'm only really competing with myself, to be honest with you, because I'm putting out a podcast and I'm putting it on a platform that it's not necessarily native to. So I can't be offended by that. I can just only enjoy and appreciate the people that I meet there and the success I find. And that's that'll keep you at the zen.
Yeah. Well, and that's a fantastic segue into my next question too, which is what's been some of the parts of this that have been the most rewarding for you?
I think that um, freelancing, I'm out of the office more, and
Mm-hmm.
this podcasting definitely keeps me in touch with my buddies, as well as it's
Mm-hmm.
been great to meet new people, especially like you guys, and having
Yeah.
Andrew on the show, and like that's something that we were kind of getting our feet wet in the first year, but now we've made like reaching out to people. We've got a couple more people coming on the show
Mm-hmm.
later on this month, and I think that has been one of the really nice benefits is that I was so focused. Like if you didn't work in my department at NBC Universal, or if you didn't run into me in my lobby on Xbox or whatever, I might not have a chance to meet people. But suddenly, after quite a long time, I'm jumping into an industry that like I knew from one angle, but I'm learning it in a completely different way, and I'm finding people like you guys and different people in that community that are really cool, and you get to meet people you just wouldn't before. So I love that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, that's good. Good insight. We've already talked about your background quite a lot and your unique kind of position and perspective coming into the indie podcasting space. With all that history and like now you've got, like you said, 60 episodes under your belt of the show that you're creating yourself. What would you tell somebody that's just starting out that wants to do what you're doing? And another way that I phrase this question is like, what would you tell yourself starting out now that you know everything you've learned over the journey so far?
That is such a good question. And I wish I had heard it before, because essentially one is, and you guys probably know all of this, but the first off is, the best time to start is now. Do not
Mm-hmm.
hesitate. I think I was bogged down with my job, and I had XYZ excuses, and I was a little bit self-conscious, and I've never really hosted anything, and you have to just push yourself and do it. And I wish I had started early. The only thing I wish is that I had started earlier. Was my first podcast the best? Hell no. In fact, our first podcast and stuff we didn't even put up on YouTube. So I think YouTube starts like an episode like, I don't know, like 15 or something like that, because we were really just trying to get our feet wet and like figure out our
Mm-hmm.
format and figure out how it works, and just kind of like we had sections on the show that didn't work as well, and we had so we were kind of like figuring it out as we went along. And I think that's the big thing is you don't have to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect, but you might suck a little bit in the beginning, but you're going to get so much better. And the only way to improve, and the only way to start, is to just bite that bullet. And I think one of the other things was I have a huge family and I
Mm-hmm.
was a little nervous. I'm like, oh crap, man! Like my family's gonna find out. They're gonna make fun of me. Blah blah blah. And and like my colleagues and all that sort of stuff. And you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, who gives a shit? I'm out there
Yeah.
hustling now, and I'm so proud of myself and my team and where we are. And I feel so lucky and blessed. And it really just took me like sacking up and just doing it, because no one's
Mm-hmm.
perfect, and you can build the plane while you're flying, and just do it and get out there. That's what I
Yeah.
think.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's
I think
great
you're
advice.
absolutely right. Yeah. And kind of another thing that I think, as somebody who listens to a lot of podcasts, or did, like I've kind of fallen off as like I've gone through job changes and whatever else, but as long as what you're talking about is interesting, the I think the audience likes to see that progression and that growth. Like your true audience that kind of finds you early, they like to be a part of that journey as you grow and as you get better. So if you're, like you say, building the plane as you're flying, and you're kind of showing that you are
Mm-hmm.
committed to this, and you're constantly improving and trying different things, and especially if you can find a way to interact with that audience and take their feedback into consideration, they like being part of that journey as well. And you kind of solidify that really like diehard core community that's been with you, since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because, you know, we tweak the show, whether it's the graphics, whether it's the music, whether it's the lighting, whether it's the background, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's the camera, and we have plans for the future. But fingers crossed, like it all comes to fruition. But we definitely have a long road ahead for it to get where we want to go. But who knows if it's
Yeah.
and who knows what's going to happen, but we definitely are excited because I do feel that honestly, after 1 year, man, I'm still at the beginning of this. I have so much to learn. And Andrew, when I talk to you and you tell me about like, oh, your experience with this podcast and you've done this format and that sort of stuff, and I'm like, man, that's where I want to get to. I'm having such a good time now. I just feel like I'm at the beginning of my journey, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. I can't wait to see where you guys go from here. I mean, seeing what you guys are doing on the YouTube front, like we've mentioned before, YouTube kind of came. We wanted to dive into that with this project, and so that's been more of like the learning process for us versus like podcasting. We were pretty comfortable with when we launched this, and so like seeing what you guys are doing over there and like some of the different elements you have in your videos is kind of, it works both ways. Like you've got ideas kicking in my head now. I'm like, what can we do to kind of tweak and add some additional like value to our video podcast and stuff like that. So I think, like you said, I think meeting new people in the space and the collaboration and all that, that's like really important. And one of the coolest elements of just like this indie podcasting community.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm always still so excited about it, and I always want to do more and that sort of stuff. But I also have to be cognizant of like not burning myself out and going too crazy. But eventually, some would love to, hire an editor, would love to like, get a real camera system instead of these webcams that we use all the time. Like I see all that sort of stuff, and I definitely want to do it. And at the same time, like I'm all, like you said, just so interested in what other people are doing and seeing what's working for them and what's fun.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, now I think it's time to talk about some video games. We're going to shift into the gaming section of this conversation and kick it off with a real simple question. Just what have you been playing lately? What are you into right now?
Good question. So to be honest with you, I love to play like the latest and greatest tentpole. Like I try and get it, day one most of the time because of the podcast, but also because I just feel like video games are the superior form of entertainment. And people will say, "Oh, I love TV. I love Netflix." I'm like, whatever. You're just sitting there boring. I'm actually in the story creating it. So I'm like, video games, are definitely where it's at. So I'm constantly playing something in between the big tent poles. Like I'm definitely looking forward to Avowed next week. I will sometimes. I'm an achievement whore, to be honest with you. So I can't go back. I can't go back and play a game that I've already unlocked all the achievements on, unless they've remastered it, which Sony has been doing left and right. So I'll play a lot of stuff. So right now it's a lot of I got into a Far Cry binge. So I did Far Cry 6, Far Cry 3, and New Dawn because Far Cry 6 just wasn't that good. So I also played Indiana Jones towards the end of the year. I also played a lot of Dragon Age Veilguard for the review that I did on our podcast. But funny enough, Andrew, in the last podcast we were on together, we had the question at the end where it was like, what big video game have you never played or whatever?
Right.
And I admitted that I had never played Elden Ring. And so I got such a reaction from that this week I went out and bought Elden Ring, and Elden Ring is the answer. And it's what I'm playing mainly right now.
Nice.
I'm getting my butt kicked in like I knew I would. But I think it's good for me. I should have picked it up earlier. I was kind of waiting for the price to drop, and then the DLC kept the price up there. And so I wanted to kind of like, I don't feel like if I'm like a true video game podcast, I feel like I have to like play all the things. And so that hurt me to admit. I deserved all the shit people gave me, and that's what I'm playing now. But that is my single player game. So I have my single player game like during the week. And during the day, and then at night I have all my multiplayer games, and those are like Fortnite, Fall Guys, Outlast Trials, Dead by Daylight, and then if I'm feeling crazy, like a Plants vs Zombies is my guilty pleasure, Garden Warfare, and Battle for Materville. Like those are my guilty pleasures. So I always have a mix of a single player game going on and then multiplayer games I play with my friends when they're on.
Nice. Yeah.
What are you guys playing? Are you playing anything similar or anything? Are you waiting for something like?
I am definitely in the like, just give me Monster Hunter Wilds now camp. Monster Hunter World is probably my favorite game, and so I've been anticipating Wilds for a long time. And so I've just been kind of like messing around with other stuff, trying to like distract myself so that I can make it to the end of February. Um, so
Did you
I do
participate in
similar
the
to
beta?
you. I did. I
Okay.
did, and I'll probably try to play some of it in between the Elden Ring Night Rain beta this weekend as well. Um,
Nice.
so, but I do similar to you though, where I tend to have, like maybe some single player stuff that I'm messing around in, and then some multiplayer stuff. So my multiplayer stuff recently has been Hunt Showdown and a little bit of Fortnite because they threw Godzilla in there for a little bit. So I
Yep.
was like, "Yep, I'll hop in
I finished
there."
my battle
Oh,
pass. I got that
yep,
done.
yep. So yeah, I did that, and then I haven't really been back.
Yeah.
And so and then single player wise, I was messing around a little bit with Alan Wake 2, which I keep needing to finish, but I also feel like I have to pay so much attention to that game
It's a
that I
little bit of
keep
work. Yeah.
like I'm enjoying it a ton, but it's just like there's sometimes after a long day where I'm just like I don't have the brain space to pay attention to this game. And then I picked up Dragon's Dogma 2 recently as well, and so I've been um, messing around in that and trying to figure out all of the obtuse things that that game wants you to do. So
Yeah. I'll be interested to hear your final opinion on Dragon's Dogma
Mhm.
2 because that one was quite polarizing.
Yeah.
I found it interesting, but I don't want to
Mhm.
say anything. I don't want to spoil
Yeah.
my thoughts. I'm curious to see what you have to say.
Yeah.
And then
I've
I
enjoyed
love.
it so far, so I'll
Okay,
say
good.
that. I'm enjoying it. I'm like 20 hours in. I'm enjoying it, but there's a lot of things where I'm just like, this is a very interesting choice, and I need to finish this game so before I decide how I actually feel about this game. So
For sure. For sure.
yeah.
And that's funny you mentioned Hunt Showdown and Elden Ring because the one thing that I think both of those games have in common that I am adverse to is that you
Mhm.
can go up, well, you can get XP or whatever, and then you can lose it. Hunt Showdown, you can go
Yep.
down levels and lose so much. So I
Mhm.
have friends that are like, Dan, come play with me this. And I'm like, oh, hell no, not because I'm so afraid to lose. I mean, there's so much at stake.
Mhm.
And Elden Ring, I've been good about banking. I'm such a chicken because I'm so early on. I found a big giant that I can farm for a little bit. So I've been
Mhm.
farming this one giant over and over because I'm such a
Yep.
pussy and I'm not afraid to admit it because I hate losing the XP. But that
Mhm.
doesn't bother you at all, or you're just
Um, I mean, obviously, I hate the feeling of like when you die and you lose like your runes in Elden Ring, or you lose like your hunter and all your gear in Hunt Showdown. But also, there's a part of me that really enjoys the like weight that gives everything that you're doing.
that's
Like when you beat a boss in Elden Ring, not only does it feel like great because you beat the boss, but it puts so much more weight behind that because it's like, and like I could have died and lost like 100,000 runes here because like I couldn't beat this boss. Same with Hunt Showdown, where it's like you go in, you're trying to make that decision of like, okay, I know where the boss compound is. It sounds like there's already another team there. Do I run in and like we try to take them on and get the boss and like extract with that, or do we just like extract early, try again next round? Because that decision has so much more weight. Because like
yeah
if you go in and you lose that fight, then you're like the all the gear that you brought into that fight is gone too. And so there's a part of me that really enjoys that aspect of it. And once you kind of learn the systems, it's like, oh, okay, it's not that it's similar with Elden Ring, where you kind of learn like, oh, now I'm at the point where I've leveled up enough that it would take another, 100 times of killing this giant to actually get another level. So like
sure. I'm
if I
getting
if
there.
I
Yeah.
lose 1,000 runes, it doesn't matter because like what like eventually some of the currency becomes a little bit more meaningless, and so it gives you, and you gain confidence too. Like the more that you do, the more bosses you beat in Elden Ring, it's like I can do this, I feel good. And you'll still run into a boss that just kicks your butt, um but then that becomes the new challenge. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's such a good way to look at it because you're right. It does raise the stakes and make things more exciting. I think maybe I was just focusing on like I have so much more to lose, but you're right.
Hmm.
I like your view on that one. Andrew, what are you playing currently?
Well, let's see. My multiplayer game is Marvel Rivals. I've been in that hot and heavy
Yeah.
for since launch. Playing that pretty consistently. I recently wrapped up Banisher's Ghost of New Eden, which we're going to talk about on the show hopefully in the near future. So I'm not going to spoil too much of my thoughts, but like I would say I'm overall positive, but there were definitely some things that I think held it back. But I had a good time with it, and so I finally recently pulled the trigger, like literally 2 days ago, and started Indiana Jones because everybody's like, it's actually really great, and I'm like, everything about it, like first person, the type of game it is, like just the design choices around it make it seem like it's not going to be good, but everybody kept saying it's great. And so when I started it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is actually pretty good. Like I'm having a really good time with it so far. So I'm hoping to stick with that. I'm also looking forward to trying Avowed. So we'll see if I like juggle both of those or if I try to finish Indie
Mhm.
first or how that goes. But that's kind of what I've
Yeah.
been playing lately.
That's so
Mhm.
funny because I had the exact same reaction to Indiana Jones. Everybody was like, "Oh, it's the greatest thing ever." So I started playing and I'm like, "I don't know about this one." And then I got stuck in all of these buildings and I couldn't find anything and I'm like, "Really? You want me to take a picture of a cat? This is a mission. I'm taking a picture of a goddamn cat." So I'm like, "I don't know if this is a game for me." But by the time you get the officer's uniform and then you go to the next area and you realize you can come back and it unlocks more later on, like once I progressed in that game, then I was like, oh, okay, I understand why people love this might not be the best game ever, but it definitely is a good game. I can't say it's bad anymore.
Mhm.
So it definitely, it was one of those ones that paid off by playing it more and unlocking more. And I got to the third area before I actually kind of burned out and stuff. But I'll go back to it because there are still achievements to be had, and I can't
Yep.
resist some achievements.
Got to get
Yep.
those achievements.
Yeah, for
I feel that.
sure.
I feel
Yeah.
that. So yeah, well, so you mentioned it a little bit earlier, I think, about just being big into video games and discovering G4 and like that was the new goal of like I got to work at G4. So how long have you been into playing video games and just gaming in general?
I mean, oh gosh, from the very beginning, I mean, just from the second I can remember seeing, well, Atari was cool and all, but when I was a little kid, I just didn't really remember it very much. But
Mhm.
being really little and then seeing like the neighborhood kids start to get the Nintendo, then there was something about Mario. When I first saw it, I was like, this is smarter than anything I've seen before. This has hidden secrets, and this takes a level of talent that the other games just didn't have, that I had never experienced before. And it was really Mario that I remember being in grade school, being really, really young, and some kid brought a Nintendo Power, a magazine. It was the very first one with Mario and claymation on the front, and I said, "I will trade you every pin, every eraser, everything I have if you will let me have that magazine because that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen." And luckily, the kid did. I ran home and I was like, "Mom, we have to subscribe to this," and she was just thrilled that I was reading. And I told her, I
Mhm.
was like, "Mom, this is what I want." And she's like, "Well, and right before I had gotten the Nintendo, because Nintendo Power came a little bit later. But when I told my mom I wanted the Nintendo as a kid, she was just like, "Damn, that's just way too expensive. We can't do that." And I was like, "All right, fine,
Mhm.
Mom. I'm going to start saving my allowance." And I would get like $5 or whatever, and I'd put it in my piggy bank. And I mean, the thing was probably what, like 300, $300 or whatever. But as a kid, you
Mhm.
don't know that. You're just like, okay, eventually at some point, this $5 is
Yeah.
gonna, piggy bank's good. It's good. And I just remember that I would go to Sunday school in church, and we would be singing the songs and stuff, and I would sing like, "Jesus loves me, this I know, for he created Nintendo." Like seriously, that's how obsessed I was as a kid. I was just like,
Yeah.
this is just meant to be. And
Mhm.
then sure shit, like around my birthday time, my mom called me and she's like, "I'm at Toys R Us. Which one do you want?" And I saw it.
Mhm.
She's like, "Oh, I got to get the Rob the Robot. I mean, if you have the shot, you
Yep.
got to take it." You know what I mean? So I'm like,
Right,
"Mom, I got to
right.
get the Rob the Robot." that Rob, sorry, Mom, it ended up not being the greatest game. And Gyromite's like, whatever. So I made the poor lady spend a little bit extra bucks. But yeah, that solidified it right there. I mean, then you're one of the cool neighborhood kids. And plus, it was a really great experience. And I had a small brother. And so I loved being the Mario and having him be the Luigi. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the video games took off from there for me, and I never looked back.
Yeah. So you started off Nintendo kid. You're now huge into achievements, which are, not Nintendo. Those are
Yeah.
Xbox, those are PlayStation, with their trophies. So what would you say is your preferred console? Do you have a preference? Do you have a favorite? Do you have like, what's the best console if you had to pick one? Like, you live in a time where you can have multiple consoles. It's not like you
Yeah.
only get the one. But if you had, like, what would you say is your favorite? What's your preferred?
Oh, that's like asking me to pick one of my children. I love them all.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, they all are doing things that are great, and then they all do things that really piss me off. So I think that I loved Xbox for a long time because it was the underdog, and
Mhm.
but they make mistakes and they do stupid stuff, and then Sony will do something that I'm like, oh well, obviously my PlayStation's my favorite, but then to be honest with you, this PlayStation 5 generation, they've released what, God of War Ragnarok, and then everything's been remastered, and I'm like, well, I played all that shit on PlayStation 4. How come Sony isn't making
Mhm.
games? I
And
guess
you
they
can
don't
play
have to because
Ragnarok on your
Xbox.
PlayStation 4 if you want to.
Yeah,
Like
sure.
that game is
Yeah.
cross-gen.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's such a good point. Um, so I think I probably spent the most time on my Xbox, and that's just because when I really
Mhm.
got into it was the 360 generation, and then all my buddies were
Yep.
online, and then I kind of got hooked on the achievements. But those. But I have to say, like, one of my favorite games of all time is going to be The Last of Us 2. I just think that is
Mhm.
the most incredible storytelling and narrative experience that I've ever experienced in a game, and that's a PlayStation game. So
Mhm.
I really go where the games are,
Yep.
and but yeah, mainly I guess Xbox. But of course, like Andrew and I were talking on the last
Mhm.
podcast, we're both in on Switch 2 already, and we don't even know
Yep.
what the launch lineup's going to be. So
Yep. Yep.
what about you guys? Did you have a favorite console?
I mean, uh, I've been Xbox for a long time. Like, got in original Xbox. At this
Oh,
point,
nice.
have become so much a part of that ecosystem. Just with, I was a very early adopter of digital games. So basically, like, once they started to kind of make that switch during the 360 era, I was like, yeah, I'm just buying digital from now on, pretty much.
Yeah,
And so at this point, I've got such a big library digitally on Xbox that I don't like, that is my console, like my preferred console. Just
sure.
because it's, but I like you, I don't have I play it up for the show a little bit, but like I don't have
Yeah.
really like an undying like I don't care. These are corporations. They don't care about me. They're
Oh,
making selfish
agreed.
decisions. And so it's like,
Agreed.
if like Sony has recently like picked up a controlling stake in From Software, and so it's like, if going forward they start making From Software games locked to the PlayStation, it's like, well, eventually I will buy a PlayStation and just play those games there. I'm not going to
Yeah.
like it. So I don't have this undying loyalty to any of them, but I do like my Xbox. So
Yeah. Well,
um
two thoughts. One, we should definitely exchange gamer tags when this is over. And
yes.
then two, you and I should go grab a beer and cry into it if Xbox quits making consoles, because I too have my biggest digital library on the Xbox.
Hmm.
And boy, oh boy, will that
Yeah.
suck if they get out of the
Yeah.
console game.
Yeah, I don't see them canceling that. I think they would probably transition more into like the like, we're making PCs now and it just plays all
Yeah.
your console games sort of situation, or like
Yeah.
they stop making them and like Dell is making like the standardized or what. um but yeah, I
Could be.
am interested to see what the next like 10 years of Xbox hold, because it could shift drastically. So
Yeah. Could be. What about you, Andrew?
I have a lot of nostalgia for Nintendo because I was like the consoles we had. We had the GameCube and we had, the
Mhm.
Wii and everything. That's what me and my siblings were always playing on growing up. But similar to you, was like 360 was like the formative gaming that I did. Like that was where I discovered Assassin's Creed. That was where I discovered like the
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto. Like that was where I like really started. Red Dead Redemption I played, and that was one of those games that kind of like opened up my eyes to stories that games
Amazing.
tell and characters and things like that. So
Amazing.
probably like the 360. Like I typically, if a game is third party, like I will play it on Xbox first if I can. But I have a PlayStation. I really enjoy the Spider-Man games. Obviously, Bloodborne is locked to PlayStation. Um, I've I'm a I'm a defender of Days Gone, so like I have some PlayStation games that I
I
love over there.
I love Days Gone. That's one of my favorite
Mhm.
ones. And then I don't know if you heard today that they announced the remaster, but
Yeah.
suckers like you and me who probably love it so much, we only have to pay $10 extra to get it because of the
Nice.
PS5 version for the upgrade. So I was like, I was out. I was like, screw you. And then they said $10. And I was like, oh, you got me back
I'm
in.
back in.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
I've
So funny.
recently gotten much more into PC gaming, like over just probably the last 6 to 9 months. I like went in. I had a decent computer that I would do like my editing and stuff on, and it could play some games. But like I went in and I bought like upgraded my monitors, upgraded all the like components, and so now like I'm actually utilizing Steam and like getting games on there. So like I've been
Mhm.
drifting more into that world more than I ever have before, and starting to like see why people like it so much. But I do like, there are some evenings where I'm like, nah, I would much rather just be sitting on my couch, like in the worst
Yep.
possible posture of all
Yes.
time,
Yes.
and playing a game on my Xbox. And so like Xbox is the one that I will like choose if I have the option. But like you, I
Mhm.
like video games, and there are good games across all three consoles. I have all three
Yeah,
consoles. I'm excited for Switch 2. I'm curious to see what kind of games we're going to get when that launches. Big Zelda
for sure.
fan, so like
Yeah.
hoping we get some more Zelda stuff, even if it's like those ports that should have come to the Switch a long time ago of
Yeah.
Twilight Princess and Wind Waker. But
Yeah, for sure. And no surprise, I'm a big Mario fan, and I just know that they are sitting on a Mario game that's going to release
Mhm.
probably this Christmas for the Switch 2. And oh man, I'm licking my chops already. It hasn't even been announced, but definitely let's
mhm.
make sure that I get your gamer tag too because I'm on Xbox all the
Yeah,
time as well.
yeah, for
For
sure.
sure.
Let's see. Next question that I have for you is one that you like are instantly going to have an answer. It's going to be one where you like deliberate and ask if you can do a top three or something like that. And what that question is, what is your favorite game of all time?
Ah, damn. That is such like,
Mhm.
yeah, I might have to cheat and do a top three, but let me just say,
Totally fine.
my cr- yeah, my favorite game of all time. It changes over time because
Mhm.
at different points in my life, I like different things about the medium. And so, what I really love about video games is, video games that, of course, and this is subjective, are just fun. Like they prioritize fun. They're really,
Mhm.
like I find them accessible. They're not too hard, but they're not too easy. They push back enough. And finding that right difficulty level can be tricky for a game. I think games that push the boundaries with graphics, I people are always like, why do we need more hardware? I'm like, oops, sorry, right here. I'm a graphics whore, and I love to see what's next. I love following ray tracing. I love following all that
Mhm.
crap that I don't even know about what it is for these cards that they keep putting out, but I want them. And I think it's amazing. I get super pumped for every generation, even though the last couple have all looked the same. I don't care. I like the big graphics that are driving up these budgets and stuff like that. So I want one
Mhm.
of those, and I like ones that change the genre a little bit, that are push it forward, that do something different, that surprise me, that because there are the
Mhm.
cookie cutters, and yes, we all love Ubisoft, but let's be honest, those are cookie cutter games. Those aren't going to be anyone's favorites because, well, unless they're your first experience or whatever, because they're the same game over. So iterative, and they change little
Mhm.
things here, but they're not blowing me away. So then, probably no surprise, but to go back to The Last of Us Part Two. I mean, everyone, it
Mhm.
was divisive. I love a good underdog for sure, and everyone and their mom was like, The Last of Us is the best game, and I was just like, I don't know, like the story's a little like it's good, but it's it's a little simple for me. In fact, it was good and bad and black and white, and the ending was like the only gray part. But The Last of Us Part 2 was so divisive and people judged it so harshly off the bat. And I was just like, I don't know what to think until I play it. And luckily, I didn't look at any of the spoilers. And man, how cool is that narrative experience? It's so mature and it's so unique. And I had never seen a company put that much love and money into a storyline that was full of gray. I mean, it took our hero and heroine, and they did good and bad things and the good things, and then they took someone who might be the villain and they make them do good things. And man, it was just cool from a complex moral standpoint. And I was like, fuck, this is art, man. Like, they are doing things that Mario, God bless him, could never do.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so that I think blew me away from like an adult perspective, because it ticked all of my boxes. But that's not to say like Witcher 3, again, an amazing narrative experience. I had never played an adventure game that had such great storytelling, and every time I went on a quest, it wasn't like, hey, go to this next town and grab 3 eggs, and then you go do some fetch quest and you want to punch them in the face when you come back, like Borderlands makes you do all the time or whatever.
Yep.
This was, like you go to a town and it's like some blight or some monster or something, and you have to like figure something out. And by the end of that quest, you have completed a storyline and there's been a traitor who's been revealed or something's great. I mean, I was just next level storytelling that games today have yet to rival, and it set the bar so high, and it's the bar that I judge all of their games by in terms of storytelling. And then probably like a Mario game or something like that. I think like Mario Galaxy. I think just because Nintendo's mantra of trying to surprise and delight, I think they knocked it out of the galaxy, I guess, with Mario Galaxy there to be a total choose of all, because they did certain things with the gravity in 3D that I'd never experienced. So I think to hit it like just a range of games and stuff, those would probably be my favorites. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on those or anything.
Yeah, no, those are definitely. I know I hear constantly good things about The Last of Us, and it's sitting next to me on in the stack of PS4 games that I need to eventually get to justify having a PS4. So, but I am very interested in those games just because I enjoy like the sort of zombie story,
I love a good zombie for sure. But the question is, I got to know, are you going to be able to play it and beat it before seasons 2 and 3 of the HBO series?
No, he is not.
No, I'm not. Will I be able to play and beat it before I watch those? Yes. Because I'm also like 3 years behind on TV at minimum. So
okay, good. Because the show's good. It's just that there's so much that happens in part 2. I hear that they're breaking up into seasons, so you need to skip season 2 and 3, and then you can watch it after you've played it.
I think you touched on an interesting point with The Last of Us Part 2 is like it shook the industry up so much and was so divisive, and so
for sure,
like it was one that was very interesting to talk about on a podcast or with your friends, because it was like people had all sorts of feelings about it, mostly about the story. Like they iterated and I think made the gameplay more enjoyable from the first game. I didn't really enjoy the gameplay of the first game that much, and I thought that the second game was a pretty big step up. But like the main thing about that game, like you said, the art of it was the story and how it was told and what they did with the characters and stuff, and whether people liked it or didn't like it. Like it was all everybody was talking about for quite a while, and I think that can't really be understated for what that game was. And then you mentioned The Witcher, and that's my favorite game of all time. So like I'm right there with you. That is the bar, and I'm super stoked for the next one whenever we finally get it. Not holding my breath. It's going to be a while probably, but I'm very excited to play more in that universe.
Me too.
Yeah, for sure.
Although Cyberpunk rattled my faith a little bit in CD Projekt Red, to be honest with you. I mean, eventually they polished it a year or two later, and I still can't say that I loved Cyberpunk the way I loved Witcher 3, but I'm just like, man, I sure hope they learn their lesson, because again, my hopes are so high for Witcher 4 that they just, as long as they don't make the same mistake, I will be really, really happy.
Yeah. And at least the kind of bright side of all the Cyberpunk stuff was that at the end of the day, like that game and especially the writing and the characters and the story and like the decisions you can make and all that, that was all like rock solid CD Projekt Red top quality. It was just the launch was a disaster and should not have gone down like that. But
No.
like some Pan Am is like one of my favorite characters of all time at this point. And so it's like for
Mhm.
me, the setting, the first person perspective, all that makes me like it less than The Witcher because The Witcher just appeals to what I like in games more.
Agreed.
Like the setting is kind of my ideal setting, that like kind of grimdark fantasy. So it's like it's perfect for me. Whereas Cyberpunk is like, yeah, Cyberpunk is cool, it's fine, but it's not like my favorite. And
Mhm.
so I'm hoping like you, I hope that they took the lessons that they learned about the launch of that game and about setting expectations and things like that. I have faith that the story will be great and that the game will be a great game. I'm just hoping that the narrative isn't going to be like, wow, they did it again, another botched launch, kind of thing.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I'm excited too that Siri's the lead in this one because
Mhm.
everyone loves Geralt. He's awesome, and but I'm curious. This will be a nice breath of fresh air. Hopefully, it's
Yeah.
just as good, if not better. But it's a switch up, and again,
Mhm.
like I was saying before with games, I don't like when it's the same thing over and over and over. And this seems
Mhm.
like okay, they're taking a risk. They're going to tell different kind of
Yeah.
stories, and this is going to be kind of interesting. And I know that was a divisive decision. And it
Mhm.
also makes me concerned about Mass Effect 5. Are they going to make like Shepard? That's the
No.
easy answer, putting Shepard
Yeah.
in as the lead and that sort of stuff. And when these games don't
Mhm.
take risks, because I know it's expensive and
Mhm.
risks don't always pay off, or risks aren't always good things. I mean, just look at Veilguard. But in this instance, I think it can be, and I think that they know what they're doing. And so I'm excited about 4 because they are making that just it's tweaking it in the right ways just to do something a little
Mhm.
different.
Yes. Yes. Well, you already kind of touched on it when you were talking about some of your favorite games, about like some of the things that you look for in a game. But I like kind of asking all our guests. I think we all have specific games that draw us to them. I look at a game and I see, like, ooh, exploration and like discovery and like all of these things are things that draw my attention to a game, and I'm like, that's going to be a game for me. What are some of the things when you look at like a game trailer, or you read some articles or listen to people talk about a game that's coming out? What are some things that sort of raise the flags for you as like, oh, this is a game I need to pay attention to, this is a game for me?
The number one indicator that I look for in almost everything is, what is it doing different? That's the first
Mhm.
question that comes to mind because at this point in my gaming experience, I play so many
Mhm.
games, and if they're not trying to do something a little bit different, if they're not changing the formula in a little way, then it's more of the same to me. Yeah,
Mhm.
look, Far Cry's are comfort food. That's why I just sat down
Yeah.
and I played a whole bunch of them because they're really fun,
Mhm.
but they're the kind of the same thing over and over again. And so,
Yeah.
while I'm used to that, and, when I look at somebody who's trying to do the same thing, if they're not doing it as well, or if they don't have their own unique twist on it, then I'm a little bit sus on it, and I don't know.
Mhm.
It's almost like you have to justify why your game exists, and I know that's a really conceited
Yeah.
view of it, but that's we're the audience, like you need to
Mhm.
convince us why, because if we sense, I think, or at least myself, I can speak for, if I sense that it's just a triple A game, cookie cutter, doing the same thing with a huge budget, and it's playing it safe. If there's no artistic merit, and if it's not doing something that I've never seen before, then
Mhm.
I'm not. I'll still pick it up and buy it and play it. Don't get me wrong. I play all sorts of
Yeah.
crazy bad stuff, but I'm just not as excited by it if it's something
Mhm.
that I've seen a million times before. And that's why some of these shooters and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, I played that one before, and the Concord,
Mhm.
I bounced off of that one, and um, but when they add twists to it, then I'm like, oh, okay, I haven't tried this. This
Yeah.
is either going to be really good or really bad. I don't know, but I'm going to try it and see what happens, and that's exciting.
Mhm. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
cool.
With that being the case, what is like your most anticipated game right now? Like looking into the future, what we know that's like been announced and what's kind of, we talked about Witcher 4 a little bit, Naughty Dog has announced a new game. So we have some big things on the horizon. What which one has got you most excited?
Okay, I have to cheat and name a couple on this one too,
All
because
right.
there are a few. Okay, so because, and the reason I have to cheat so hard is because obviously the answer that everyone is going to pick is the same one that this jabroni is going to pick. GTA 6. We are all
Mhm,
sitting here. We're all waiting for it. We can't wait. We want the exact date. I'm afraid it's going to get pushed to the next year. Who knows? But
mhm.
I am definitely here for it. I'm such a huge fan. I think they have some work to do on their control scheme, so I'm a little bit nervous there because the last one was so outdated. But then that was like what 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so to be fair, they have some time. So definitely GTA. Then I would
Mhm,
also say Fable looks phenomenal. I played
mhm.
Fables when I was younger, and I loved them. I thought they were so clever, and they have
Yeah.
such a unique British sense of humor that a lot of video games don't have.
Mhm,
They've done certain things with magic and sword fighting and weaving elements of like fables and stories, of course, from um, and so I'm like super pumped to see that because
yeah.
they seem to know what they're doing when they're creating this, and it just kind of it's I thought that nostalgia a little bit to me,
Yeah.
because I played so many of them, and of course it looks fantastic. It is not a
Mhm.
slouch in the graphics department. And then I some of my guilty pleasures I can't wait for are Dying Light, The Beast. I'm a huge Dying Light fan. The second one
Mhm.
didn't quite do it for me. It wasn't as good as the first one, but The Beast seems to have like taken their over scoping ambitions of two and narrowed it down to a good storyline with Aiden from the first one. So super pumped about that. And then
Yeah.
my guilty pleasure, if you're like, okay, this guy does not like good games, because the guys on my podcast make fun of me for it. But I'm secretly, and I'm probably the only one out there, pumped for John Carpenter's Toxic Commando
Mm,
because I love a new horde-based shooter. I'm a sucker. I like for
mhm.
horde. I like something happened when Gears of War did it way back in the day, and I just
Yeah.
can't get enough of a good one. There are lots of bad ones out there, but I, I
Mhm,
I love a good horde mode, and I love John Carpenter movies, and I love
mhm.
zombies, and so Toxic Commando seems like it could be a good time. Can't wait to learn more about it. But those are
Yeah.
my tops.
Awesome. Awesome. A lot of
What
good
about
ones
you
on that
guys? Any
list.
thoughts on those, or any ones you're looking forward to?
I'm gonna have to look at Toxic Commando because I hadn't heard of that one. So that one, it sounds interesting. And uh, Dying Light is another one that I thought it was DLC for the second game. I didn't realize that the Beast was like a standalone game. So that's awesome
Yeah,
too. So,
yeah,
um, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Definitely looking forward to
like,
GTA like you.
yeah, for sure, for
mhm,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, like I said, my focus has been like February 28th, Monster Hunter Wilds, and like knowing that GTA 6 is out there.
Understandable.
So
Yeah.
once that comes out, I'll be able to look a little bit further down that road. But
Dylan has
so
already said multiple times that like he's planning to play Monster Hunter for the whole year. So I don't know that he really
yeah,
sees much else beyond Monster
no.
Hunter at this point, but I
Well, then the latest trailer is probably good news to you because I saw that they
Yes.
announced they have a roadmap, and they didn't show too
Hmm.
much, but they showed a new monster they're going to be adding, and they were talking about updates. And I love when a game is already talking about updates and it hasn't even
Yeah.
come out yet. It's like clearly they're investing in this and
Hmm.
they expect it to be great, and it looks great. So I'm sure
Yeah.
you'll be pumped.
Yeah. Oh yes, yeah, and they have a good track record with at least the past like 3 or 4 Monster Hunter games where it has been a very like, you know, stuff coming out at least monthly or, pretty frequently throughout the year, then a big sort of expansion like a couple years down the road and then, you know, good support of that as well. So so yeah, I am definitely excited for what it's going to be. And I know I played World the year it came out, like for pretty much the rest of that year. I think I put like 200-300 hours into the game that year. Um, so I'm fully anticipating just from the taste I have gotten from the beta that will be the same
Well,
for.
quick segue. Have you tried Wild Hearts?
I did. I played that like a little bit in December and January because I was looking for something to scratch the Monster Hunter itch.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I
so
thought that was
I was
great.
like,
It's like Fortnite
yeah,
meets Monster Hunter. I loved it.
yeah. Yeah, I thought it was very impressive. Like I liked that it I liked what they did with the weapons in that game, because it wasn't just like copy paste Monster Hunter weapons. It was like they were doing some new cool stuff with it. Um, and I'm interested to see what, if anything, Monster Hunter, like the Monster Hunter team, looked at from that game and has maybe
Yeah,
taken from it. Because I do think the Monster Hunter team does a very good job innovating and like iterating. But I
that's
think
good.
having like a good solid like competitor sort of thing
Yeah,
is always a positive thing. I think Call of Duty, once Medal of Honor, and some of those other like Battlefield kind of diverged or just ceased to exist. They kind of settled in on their laurels and haven't really been doing a whole lot since then. So I don't think Capcom has impressed me with just a lot, especially recently. I don't see Monster Hunter doing that, but I think it's always good to have some other games in there sort of being like, hey, here's a different idea, something else you
yep,
can do,
expanding the genre.
So,
I love it.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this year actually looks pretty. I was telling Dylan the other night, we were just talking. It's like this looks like a year where I'm excited about. Like a lot of games are speaking to me. We have a lot of new action games coming out. Xbox is finally releasing some of the like big games to Game Pass that we've been waiting on, with like Avowed, Expedition
Mhm.
33, or like Clear Obscure Expedition 33, South.
Yep.
And then for me personally, I'm a really big Assassin's Creed fan, so I'm looking forward to Shadows. Hoping that everything I've seen so far looks exciting. I'm hoping it lives up to that excitement, and it's not just as like overly bloated as Valhalla was, but we'll see. We'll see when it finally releases.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I can say about that is that just looking at their motion capture, the ninja flipping through windows and all the getting behind people and cutting, like they've captured the protagonists and to a degree and with us like that it looks so smooth. I've never seen that before. So at least they're pushing the genre fast forward in that. And I think that looks fantastic, just from the level of detail and polish they've been putting in it.
Yeah, they've
Mhm.
it's the sad part about this game is it's getting buried under like all the controversy around the protagonist. It's
Ugh.
getting buried under all the controversy of like Ubisoft sucks, so we're just going to roast this game. But like as an Assassin's Creed fan, having played every game and like looking at what they're doing with this one, exactly, like you can see the little details and the care they're putting into it.
Mhm.
You can see the like the introduction of the grappling hook and being able to like uh, put out lights and shadows actually like affecting stealth and being able to go prone, and like the two different play styles with the protagonist, one being like real big and like heavy and like just clobbering dudes, and the other one you have to, if you get in combat it's going to be a lot tougher, so you want to kind of go with stealth. Like it really feels like the team cares about this game. I mean, it's the Assassin's Creed Odyssey team, and like it's one of the better kind of more um like highly regarded teams I think within Ubisoft, and so I have
Odyssey was
hopes for this
fantastic.
one. Yeah, exactly. I have good hopes, or high hopes, for that game. I don't know, it's probably not going to be enough to save Ubisoft, but I do think it will be a
Oh
good
yeah.
experience.
Oh, poor Ubisoft.
Well, with all that being said, let's go ahead and roll into our closing segment for this episode. So like I said at the start, Dylan has prepared a game for us. Dylan, what did you cook up for this episode?
I cooked up a I got it from Google. So if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it is essentially like my semi version of Family Feud. So I pick a topic or a few different topics or lists essentially. So, for example, tonight we've got three different lists. We've got the best Zelda games. We've got games that deserve a remake, and we've got the best Capcom franchises. Um, and so I type that into Google, and I find various lists that random people, random sites on the internet have put together, ranked. And then I go in and I compile all those lists to get an average list essentially. And so if a certain game appears on a bunch of different lists, that could, help it rise to the top. If it, appears very high on like 3 lists, but not at all on a few other lists, it could still appear pretty high because so many people ranked it very high, So, but it's up to you guys to try to guess. So we'll go back and forth guessing, and you'll get points based on the rank of the game that it ended up in for the final compiled list, and then each round will double the points, and then we'll see who is winning at the end of this. I did. I'm going to link in the chat window here, like the Google board. Just if you want a visual component for it. We found out that Zencaster does not allow screen sharing, so that part isn't going to matter. Like, you may get some of this for the podcast. This may get cut out. Who knows? But I was just going to do that. I'll update that in case you guys want sort of that visual component, just to see what has been guessed and where it is and that sort of thing. So anyway, like I said, the 3 categories: best Zelda games, games that deserve a remake, and best Capcom franchises. Dan, we're going to let you pick the first category and the third category. And so you get a little bit of an advantage there. And keep in mind that scores in the second round are doubled, scores in the third round are tripled. So, you may want to strategically think about how you want to, like, what ones you want to pick when.
Yeah.
So, what would we like to start out with?
So that was the Zeldas, the
Yes.
remakes, and what was the third one?
Best Capcom franchises.
Okay. I know. I'm like, whoa, tricky. Let's start with something because of the point value. So I'm going to start with something that's probably going to be a little bit harder,
Okay.
just so we can knock out the more nebulous ones. And I'm going to go, because it's so, everyone's going to be different on it. I'm going to the remakes, because that sounds so hard.
Yeah. Yes. So, I put this one together because if you are interested, if you like hearing from Dan and them, they did a list on their. Was it a blog article, or did you guys talk about it on the podcast, or both?
Well, sometimes we talk. Yeah, we'll do both.
Yeah, but they did a episode or list about games that they want to see remakes of. So, if you're interested, definitely check that out. So Dan, we'll let you go first. We'll start it off, and Andrew will keep score for me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. I'm trying to think. I know it's kind of a deep cut, but I do think it appears on quite a few lists. I could be wrong, but because it's the first one that comes to mind. It's not going to be number one, but Eternal Darkness, is that on there at all?
That was on some of the lists that I looked at, but it was not high enough on any of them to end up on the compilation list, the top 10.
Right.
So, but that's a good guess, and that's one I would love to see a remake, because I think it's just locked to GameCube, right? Like,
it is.
if you don't have a GameCube, you can't play this game probably, unless you're doing some sailing of the high seas on PC, probably. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we going till we each miss one?
I mean, once you get something, yes.
Okay.
If you both whiff on the first round, yeah. Then we'll keep going until
games that need a remake. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time.
Well, that's a good one. I'd take
so.
that.
Well, I mean,
think that
they're supposedly remaking it, right?
Yeah.
So it's
and so I will clarify too that some of these remakes may have been announced but have not come out.
Okay.
Or are widely speculated, or like are questionable.
All right.
So like Sands of Time it's not, but Sands of Time could be on the list. because it's been kind of announced, but it's been development hell for
Yeah.
years and years, and it's questionable of whether or not it still exists.
No, I
But
had
things like Silent Hill that appeared on a lot of lists did not make the cut because
It's
obviously
already
Silent
out.
Hill did get a remake last year
Yeah.
or this year, last year,
that was
last
last
year.
year. I have to go with Bloodborne.
No, I knew
Yep.
it after you said that it had been announced. I was like, oh, nuts.
Yes. So Bloodborne was the number 7 game.
Wow.
And so that will get you 4 points.
All right.
And a lot of hearts were broken earlier today when we went yet another state of play with no mentions of Bloodborne and other games getting remasters instead. So,
Yeah.
all right, Dan, what's your next guess? What are you thinking?
Again, just because you mentioned that some of these might be rumored ones, I'm guessing it's gonna be maybe a Resident Evil 5 because I've heard rumors of that. People they keep remastering those Resident Evils and they seem to have a big fan base. Don't know if it made the list, but first came to mind.
Yeah, that is a good guess, and it did not make the big list though.
Another swing, another
unfortunately.
miss.
Yes.
Now I'm tempted to go with a different Resident Evil, but I'm not sure. There's 2 that I think I've heard people talk about, but I also don't know if I just want to follow my heart and think of like games that I want to see remade.
Right? Yeah, me
Yep.
too.
I appreciate you
Yep.
for picking this category first because this one is definitely the broadest, I feel like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Were you going to say something, Dylan?
No, I covered it last time. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll say Resident Evil Code Veronica.
Code Veronica is the one that made the list.
Oh,
the big
nuts.
list.
I
Yep.
knew a Resident Evil would be on there. I just didn't know which one.
The other one I was thinking of was 1. Like it's technically has a remake, but people have been like they want it to be remade in like
it's
the
old
new
enough that
Mhm.
like it came out on the 360, so people are like, oh, I want another remake. So yes, Resident Evil Code Veronica was the number 6 choice, and so that gets you 5 points.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, not to go too much into our other list. There's got to be a Zelda game on there. I figured maybe the Ocarina of Time.
Yes, Ocarina of Time is
That was
number 3.
That was
Third
my
time's a
harder
charm.
pick.
So that is 8 points for Dan. And
I totally stole that from Andrew because he said it on our podcast.
Yep, and that is one that is technically has been remade, but
for the 3DS,
it was
right?
remade for the 3DS. So it's like people want to see a true remake on a console that they can play in the modern day. That's not just the N64 or the 3DS upscaled version on the N64 expansion on Nintendo Switch Online or whatever. So, but yes, that is one as well. So, Andrew.
I'm going to stick with Nintendo and say Super Mario 64.
Super Mario 64 is one of the 2 that is tied for 8th place. So that'll get you 2 points.
That's a good one. Crap.
Yeah, that's one I could see them, like, if Nintendo is going to remake it, I think that could correlate with Dan's guess of like they're sitting on like a 3D Mario game that they're just like waiting for the Switch 2 to drop. I could see that being one. I don't know that they would do that though, because I think there's a lot of nostalgia, but Nintendo seems to be like averse to remakes. It's weird.
Yeah.
They just re-release it again in its old state. And so as long as people are buying that, like, why remake it?
And I do.
Yep.
Exactly.
All right. So my next pick, I don't know if people actually are asking for this because they seem to be happy with it. It's just such a big title. So I wanted to give it a shot because my more obscure picks didn't quite make it. So I'm going to say Skyrim. Any chance it's on there?
Skyrim's good guess, but not on the list.
Oh,
Not on
nuts.
the list.
Now you got me thinking. If Skyrim might not be on the list, but is Morrowind on the list?
Morrowind is also not on the list. I think Morrowind was number 11 because there were a lot of people that wanted to see Morrowind remade, but not enough to bump it up. And so that was 2 misses in a row. So we will call this category done. So
Can I just throw a
the
couple just to see for not
yeah
points, but I just want to know.
yeah.
A deep cut would be the Earthbound series, and then I always wanted Prototype. Any chance either one of those made? Those were my next
Um,
guesses.
Prototype was on a lot of lists, but it was ranked pretty low on those lists. So I think it was like 12 or 13. And then Earthbound, there were a couple of lists that had it, but not as many as I was expecting. Not
For
as many
sure.
as I was expecting for that one.
Yeah, because people don't shut up about that game, and I haven't even
Yeah,
played it.
exactly. I hear constantly that it's like, oh, this is the greatest game, but then I never
Yeah,
like there seems to be no push to like do anything with it.
for sure.
So the list number 10 was BioShock. They want
Interesting.
the original BioShock remade.
I did love
One
that
of the
one.
two ties for eighth. So Super Mario 64 is the one Andrew got, and then Bully, the
I
Rockstar
love that
game,
one.
was also tied for 8. Bloodborne 7, Resident Evil Code Veronica was 6. Knights of the Old Republic was 5. I know there
Oh,
is a remake
theoretically,
theoretically
yeah.
announced and supposedly happening, but it is looking in danger. So,
Yeah.
um, Dino Crisis was number 4,
Oh,
and then
Hmm.
Ocarina of Time number 3, the original Metal Gear Solid at number 2,
I was wondering if
and
that was on there.
then Chrono Trigger at number 1. So
Oh,
Oh yeah.
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is
Okay.
another one that I constantly hear about. And they remade Chrono Cross, right? But not Chrono Trigger, or they
Yeah.
re-released it maybe or something. So, um, but yeah, so that is games that deserve a remake. So what are the scores as they stand now, Andrew?
So going into the next round, Dan has 8 and I have 11. So the one that he got brought him, like, it's still really close race. He got one of those high scoring answers
Mm-hmm.
where I ended up getting a few of the like
Thank
stragglers at
God,
the end.
Yep.
because I was whiffing left and right on that category, but I'm glad we got that one out of the way.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just a toughie.
yes. So, Andrew, that leaves you to take the choose the second category. So we've got best Zelda games and best Capcom franchises.
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave the Zelda games for the finale, and we're going to go Capcom here.
All right. So what is your first guess for best Capcom game?
Let's see. Is this franchises or individual games?
This is franchises. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. So it
Well,
is franchises, and there are no ties. So
okay.
everything is.
And I got to kick it off with Resident Evil.
Resident Evil is the number 1 franchise.
Ooh, good one.
So that by a long shot too, that was
Yeah.
pretty good. So 20 points for the number 1 answer there on the board. Dan, what's your guess?
Well, taking into consideration you, Dylan, I'm gonna say Monster Hunter.
Monster Hunter, another good guess. I don't think it's as high as it should be, but it is number 6 on the list. So
I
that
was
would
hoping there's
be.
some bias on then you had put it way up there.
Yeah.
I
Dylan looked at
wish.
his
I
own
wish.
list and put it at number 1.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is 10 points for Dan for Monster Hunter, the Monster Hunter franchise. Andrew.
All right. I'm going to go with. I'm like 90% sure that they make this series. Street Fighter.
Oh,
Yep.
that's the one I was gonna pick next.
Okay.
Yep. Street Fighter is the number 2 answer. So that is 18 points right there. So good guess.
Nice.
Okay, this is not probably going to be a higher one. In fact, I hope it makes the list, but it's a personal favorite for me. I'm going to say Dead Rising franchise.
Yes, Dead Rising is on the list. It is the number 8. So that is 6 points. I also really like Dead Rising.
That's
It
so fun.
is. I have not played like 3 or 4. I don't. Well, no, I played a little bit of 3, but 1 and 2 I really enjoyed, and just especially like back in the day on the 360, just being super impressed with what it was doing. So,
Yeah, so many zombies.
mhm. Yes. So Dead Rising number 8. Andrew, what's your guess?
So looking at the board here, there's still 6 more, and I'm like, really? So I don't know,
Capcom
like,
has a lot of franchises.
yeah, I wonder how many like smaller. There has to be quite a few like smaller franchises that made the
There
list.
are some smaller franchises that made the list. There are at least 3 very large franchises that you are overlooking, though. So,
Well, I have another one that I'm pretty sure that they make.
mhm.
Oh man, I don't. And that's going off of the like items you could find in Dead Rising. I'm like, you could dress up,
Mhm.
like you could get these.
Oh, that's
Um,
so funny. That's such a good one. Now you've given me ideas.
and I'm pretty sure you could get Mega Man's Buster in that game. So I'm going Mega Man.
Oh,
Mega
damn.
Man, yes, number 4 on the list. So that is 14 points. Um, and yes, you could find Mega Man's like little blaster thing in Dead Rising and put it on. So, and in Monster Hunter, there's usually like a little Mega Man quest you can go on where you can then dress your like little companion up as Mega Man to come help you fight. So that's why
Nice.
I know that they make Mega Man. So, all right,
Um, the,
Dan.
my next one, again, I'm not sure it's one of their bigger ones though.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's the first one that comes to mind is Devil May Cry.
Yes, that
Yeah.
is their number 3
Yeah.
Okay, all
rated
right.
franchise. So that is 16 points for Dan. I feel like it's been a while since we've gotten one of those too. I feel like we're
Yeah. It was like
due to see a trailer for
2019.
another one.
Well,
So,
didn't
Yeah.
they? Hasn't there been like a talk or an announcement of a remake of the first one?
no, I don't know.
I thought I heard that
I
somewhere, but
up with that. It
um,
wouldn't shock me. I mean, they've been having good success remaking some things. So,
yeah. So you said there were 3 big ones that I was overlooking, and I think we've gotten 2 of them now. So I'm trying to remember what is Capcom's remaining.
I know it's tough. I'm also like trying to think of all the
Mhm.
things I've played.
They did they do Dino Crisis? Is Dino Crisis one of them? I know people are always
they
clamoring for
did.
remakes.
They did do Dino Crisis. So Dino Crisis was the number 10, barely making the list, beating out a
Oh,
couple of other games. So that is 2 points. But they did do Dino Crisis.
all right.
And every time people show it that like Turok trailer, everybody's like Dino Crisis, and it's like, no, it's Turok. Sorry, gotcha.
Right? Yeah.
So
Mm, gosh, I'm trying to think. Ah, I know I'm going to be kicking myself when you reveal the rest of them. I know they made. I don't think it made the list, but I know they made Beautiful Joe back in the GameCube era.
yes, Beautiful Joe is one of the ones Dino Crisis beat out. So
Oh,
Beautiful Joe did not make the list, but it was on a few of the lists. So
All right. So again, I feel like I'll probably be kicking myself, although not. I don't think I'll kick myself that hard because like
you got
I've
most of the big, like pretty much every big one. I feel like
the
at this
only
point.
games that we've talked about really that I've like played a lot of some Mega Man games and Dead Rising. So like
Mhm.
all of the new Street Fighter look dope, and I want to play it. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna swing here because I'm not sure which company actually made the game, but I'm going to go Marvel versus Capcom.
Yes. So it's the Capcom versus series.
Nice.
So they also I think did one with SNK, and I think it
Mhm.
started with like some X-Men game, like X-Men versus Capcom as well. But the Capcom versus series is number 5.
Nice.
So that is 12 points.
Dang. I knew there was another fighter out there, and I was just trying to think what it was.
Yep.
I'm literally like, that was my last, like,
I know.
I'm
I'm trying to
completely
think.
guessing at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
I
think
think that-
either of you should feel bad if you don't get the remaining 2 on this list, because one of them
trying
I didn't know Capcom made, and the other is not one that I think is huge. So,
Well, one I think they make that's not huge would be Bomberman. Is that on
okay.
any chance?
That was not on the list that I was
Rats.
seeing. So Andrew, do you have a final
Yeah,
or
let me.
a guess? I won't put final guess on you, but
Right.
I wouldn't be shocked if this is the final guess here.
Yeah, let me. Capcom. Dragon's Dogma.
Dragon's Dogma is made by Capcom, but it is not one of their.
Oh man, that's such a good guess.
Yeah, that is a good
Oh,
guess. So
and I know it's we're finished with this, right?
yeah.
Okay,
So you can throw
then
some.
not for points. I just want to guess, like, any chance Bionic Commando was on there? Because I was fighting between myself, like, about which one I should say. I'd love
Bionic
to hear this go.
Commando did not make the big list, but it was
Okay.
on some of these smaller or like the list that I was pulling from. So the people that liked that game really liked that game, but not enough to
Yeah.
beat out like everybody putting Resident Evil at like number 1 on their list. So
Yeah, Resident Evil was
All right, just curious.
pretty obvious.
yep. So the list for best Capcom franchises as rated by random people on the internet was number 10, Dino Crisis, number 9, Final Fight, number 8,
Mm.
Dead Rising, number 7, Ace Attorney,
Oh yeah.
number 6, Monster Hunter, number 5, the Capcom Versus franchise, number 4, Mega Man, number 3, Devil May Cry, number 2, Street Fighter, and number 1, Resident Evil. So, Andrew, where does that leave us with points for going into the final round?
Going into the final round, Dan has 40 points and I have 85.
Oof,
This is where I bring it, though, so don't get too comfy
Yes,
over
I
there,
was going to
Andrew.
say the third round with
Yeah.
triple points, like
The-
that
yeah,
seems like a big
triple-
lead, but
Yeah, I was going to say it takes one good guess from Dan, who has the first guess of the round, to just
shit.
completely erase your lead here. So
Yeah.
Well,
these are the best Zelda games, and for caveat's sake, I will say I bundled all of the ones that were like, if it's been remade, like, so A Link to the Past, like if people put the original Link to the Past on, or they put the Link to the Past remake that came out on Switch,
You mean Link's
that counted
Awakening?
as, or yeah,
Yeah,
A Link's
Link's
Awakening.
Awakening. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
counted as the same. Like I didn't split them
Gotcha.
up. And they didn't get, like, if both appeared on one list, just the one that appeared highest counted.
Okay.
So so Daniel, you have the first guess. So best Zelda games as rated by random outlets, random people, random ranker sites on the internet. What do you think the internet's favorite Zelda
The
game
fact that you
is?
like put all those out there before this one, I feel like this is going to be a list we disagree with.
Could be. Oh man, the pressure of the first guess. Okay, I feel like, yeah, I don't know if I agree with this one or not agree. I mean, it's a great one. I mean, they're all great, really, but I feel like critics and the audience really loved Breath of the Wild, and so that would be my first guess.
All right, Breath of the Wild is the second most popular
What?
Zelda game.
Oh, I'm
So
leaving the
that
door
is-
open for you, Andrew.
Yep.
That is 27 points for Dan. So I think that basically almost erases your lead too. So
Yeah.
But I'm leaving the door open.
Mhm.
You're leaving the door open for Ocarina of Time.
No,
Really?
it is on the list.
Well,
It's
yeah.
number 3 though. It is
That makes
not
me
the number 1
curious
game.
about what number 1 is.
I thought for sure it was number 1 too. Now I have to rethink my whole Zelda life.
So that is 24 points, Andrew.
Oh,
All
crap.
right.
There's so many good ones. Okay, well, maybe there's some recency bias and they're going with Tears of the Kingdom.
That was my line of
That is
thinking.
correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. Tears of the Kingdom is the number 1 Zelda
Finally.
game according to the internet. That is 30 points for Dan. Andrew.
All right. Well, now I'm going to go with one of my personal favorites, which is Wind Waker.
Oh, good one.
Wind Waker, good guess. Number 5. Number 5 on the list. So that is 18 points.
All right.
I'm going to say, just because it's pretty highly regarded, A Link to the Past. We haven't said that one, right?
No, we haven't.
A Link to the Past is number 4. So 21
Yes.
points for Dan.
You said 21 points?
Yes, 21 points.
Okay. Yeah, it's close. It's a close race now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. We've got the top half.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to go with... yeah, I guess I'll just go ahead and go with Twilight Princess.
Twilight Princess, number
one.
8 on the list for 9 points.
Dang. Well, hopefully the original Zelda made it. So just the original first one.
Yes, the original Zelda did make it at number 9.
Okay.
So that is 6 points for Dan. I was also glad to see the OG make it because I was like, it feels like it should be on the list somewhere,
Right.
So,
I know there are like the Zelda games that Capcom made, ironically, and some of the other like handheld ones that people really like, but that's kind of like a blind spot for me. Like I mostly play just like the mainline console ones. So I'm going to go with Majora's Mask.
Yes. So Majora's Mask is number 6 on the list.
Oh, nice.
So that is 15 points.
Man, I didn't see that one coming because I hated that as a kid.
Yeah, it was so hard as a kid, so convoluted.
It was so hard, needlessly.
Really interesting, like concept, though.
Yeah,
for sure. It's tough because I have my favorites, but I don't know that they're gonna make it. So, well, I mean, we should do Link's Awakening, right? We mentioned it, but I don't think we said it as a guess. And they did the remake of it, which was really nice. So maybe that got it some points.
Yes. So Link's Awakening is the number 7 game on the list.
Nice.
So that is 12 points for Dan.
So now all that's left is the number 10 game.
Really? Sheesh.
Yeah, we've almost cleared the board, which is cool.
I'm so happy we saved this one for last. That's awesome.
And like out of the games I've played, the only one that's really left is Skyward Sword, which is very divisive. And I feel like maybe one of like handheld games, people like it better. But I couldn't tell you which one out of all those games people prefer. So I'm just going to go with Skyward Sword and see if it made it as being like a mainline entry.
It is not the number 10 best Zelda game according to the internet. So
yeah, that doesn't really shock me. So it's up to you, Dan, to see if we can clear the board.
I know. I'm so torn because there's what I like, and then there's what I think that they've said. Okay, I'm gonna go with what I think they've said, and that's gonna be probably the Oracle Ages, Oracle of Seasons duo.
That was not the number 10 one either.
Okay.
But that was a good guess. I think that was like number 11.
What's the one you would have picked if you were going, if you're following your heart? Yeah. Instead of what you think.
Zelda 2 for I loved that game for some reason. I don't know why. I just was so again, it was one of those games blew my mind. It was so different from the original, but it was awesome at heart.
Yeah. So the number 10 was A Link Between Worlds.
Oh yeah.
Which I think was one of the handheld ones. I'm not entirely sure on that one.
I think so.
That was one I was not familiar with. So
yeah.
But yeah, so where does that put the final scores, Andrew?
So the final scores, Dan with a respectable 136 at the end, and myself coming in at 151. So
all right,
nice.
So pretty close there at the end when you're taking triple points into consideration. That was, and we were so close to clearing that board. I was hoping we did it, but my blind spots got me.
Yep.
No, that was good times, and I don't mind losing as long as it's not a blowout. So I was worried about that at the first category. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Well, thankfully it wasn't a blowout, and as a consolation prize, this is the part of the show where I want you to go ahead and plug your show. I mean, we've been talking about it a lot, but like plug where people can find you. Where are you on the internet? You've referenced a website, you've referenced YouTube, but like shout those out, tell people where they can find you. We'll put links to all that in the podcast description to make it easy to find. But yeah, go ahead and plug your stuff.
Okay, awesome. No, I really appreciate that. The easiest way to find us is probably goodplayingwithyou.com. That's our blog. We've got a link tree there that sends you everywhere, as well as our YouTube channel is also just Good Playing With You, and that'll send you to the Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, and all that sort of stuff. And we're once a week podcast every Friday morning. So if you want like quick news bites and quick takes, it's definitely, please check it out. We'd love to have you.
Yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely. And I second that. If you are looking for a familiar voice, I was on one of their most recent episodes, so you can start there and then check out some of their other stuff that they have. I had a great time being on that show. I think you guys are doing a really good job over there, so highly recommend everybody go give them a listen.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for coming on. This has been a ton of fun getting to know you and learn more about you as a gamer and a podcaster, and your history at G4 and all that stuff was really cool. It was a blast talking to you on this episode.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. You guys are awesome, and I really appreciate the time.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming on. Yeah.
And to you, the listener, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We genuinely appreciate it. That is all for this episode. We'll catch you on the next one. Remember to stay friendly, gamers.